Hey, welcome into the Big Ten Huddle. I'm host JR, presented and brought to you by FanDuel. Appreciate you being here as we have Carson Bounds with us from Orange and Blue News over at the On3 Network, covering the Fighting Illini, Illinois football, basketball, anything over there, you name it. And Carson's here to talk with us about the Illinois football transfer portal situation. Now, Illinois came into the transfer portal needing, a few players in a few different areas. In addition to adding players that they needed, they also lost some a little bit unexpectedly. So we're going to talk through all of it. But the good news is that Illinois did get their starting quarterback for next season, and Illinois fans have a lot to be excited about with Katin Houser coming in from East Carolina there. Carson, before we get started, let people know where they can find your social media and all that stuff, so they can continue to catch up with you after this episode.
Yeah, of course, Carson Bounds on Twitter, at Carson L. Bounds on Instagram, and you can find me over at orangeandbluenews.com. That's the Illinois On 3 Network website. Yeah, I'm publishing stuff there pretty much weekly at this point, and then very active on Twitter. So if you enjoy a good Illinois Twitter account, I'm your guy.
There you go. Carson does a great job over there. Definitely go give him a follow. And him and I are on Talk Illini and stuff all the time together. So this is nothing new for me and Carson. And which, by the way, go follow Talk Illini on Twitter, YouTube, all those different places for Illini coverage there as well. So all right, Carson, let's get started with this. You and I have already talked about a lot of this stuff, but just to kind of get your thoughts on it, and then I'll kind of add my stuff here and there. Illinois is taking the route of mostly G5 and FCS players that they're adding to the program this year. They did get Jake Renfro, the center from Wisconsin, so it's not all G5 and FCS players, but mostly those guys are the ones they've added in. Do you feel like Illinois has added enough through the portal so far? If not, do you think that there's a possibility Illinois could still be adding more?
Yeah, I think any Illinois fan you've looked at online has probably voiced some degree of displeasure with the recruiting class so far, specifically through the portal. I don't necessarily have the same perspective as many of the fans do. I do think there are clear areas for improvement. I'll talk on the defensive line in a little bit, but the key points that they had to hit on, especially in offense, I feel like they filled the holes perfectly fine. I think Kaden Houser is a plus level replacement for Luke Altmyer. Do I think he's going to be, year 3 Luke Altmyer as a 1-year rental? Probably not, but I do think he's a guy who's going to play winning football at Illinois. I don't think this is a player that's going to, take a big step back at Illinois. I love the growth that he showed at ECU over the last 2 years. Some other guys, Christian Martin, kind of a high upside developmental tackle out of Colorado State. I think he could probably compete as a rotation guy year 1. If not, he's probably a definite starter 2 years from now. Offensive line interior, Jake Renfro he's a stud. I think a 3-star grade in the portal from any service, not to dog on my own recruiting service, but I think 3 stars is a little low for a guy that's played thousands of career snaps and has conceded, I think the stat was like 2 sacks in his last 500 snaps while playing injured. That is rare production from a veteran player who's played, I think this is going to be his 6th year of college football. He was a college freshman when I was a freshman, and I'm at grad school, getting ready to graduate after 2 years of grad school, after 4 years undergrad. So he's played football at the college level for a long time, both at Cincy and Wisconsin. I love what that adds. You're replacing Josh Kreutz at the center spot, and you're getting older, which is crazy because Kreutz is graduating after starting for 2.5 years at Illinois. Some other pieces on the offense that I love. I love the additions of Jayshon Platt and Alex Perry, the FAU and FIU receivers respectively. And Perry especially, I think he's going to be your he shores up the outside receiver presence that you've been missing. This last season, Illinois had good receivers, but was there a dominant outside guy? Game to game, sure. Justin Bullock was awesome in the end zone, but between the 20s, game to game, maybe there wasn't as much production. Perry's a guy, I think he could give you 50, 60 yards a game, kind of as a safe floor, as long as you're giving him a healthy, target diet. And he's going to produce at Illinois. I'm very excited about him. Kind of moving then to defense. That's where it gets a little more shaky with the Illinois fans. I like the linebacker addition so far. I think William Holmes, he hasn't gotten a ton of buzz. Neither is Robert Edmondson. Those are the 2 linebackers Illinois has added so far. I love both of their upside. Edmondson's a little undersized. I think he'll probably need to add 10 or 15 pounds. But, for a Power 4 weight, strength, and conditioning program, that's one off season at least. So he'll be perfectly fine. I think he'll be ready to compete. And then Holmes is, he was the 2018 MLB draft class, selected 151st overall. He's old. He's only played a year of college football. He was productive in that year. I'm very excited. I think he's high upside, and he comes in Big Ten ready physically. He's not a guy that needs to add or lose 20 pounds. I think he's a guy physically, he's fit to compete at the Big Ten level, and that's exciting. And I think he also moves pretty well for his size. He's probably a good 250, and I think he moves like a guy who's maybe 225. He's, it doesn't move like a receiver, but he moves better than the average linebacker for his size. Probably, I could see what an MLB team saw in him 8 years ago, thinking about it. But and then, the corners and safeties as well. LeVon Williams and Deuce Fillmore are the two that come up. I, again, love both additions. I think Fillmore is a guy that can compete for rotational reps right away. The more I watch his film, I kind of like his fit at corner. Like, if Jaquan Morris is your, solidified CB2 with Juice Clark starting opposite corner on the outside, I think Fillmore can be your rotational guy, come in, kind of do what Juice did for this team a year ago and come in, compete, just give a lot of competitive reps. And then I think Williams is probably your free safety. Again, I love what I see on his tape. Explosive, quick. He's a guy, when I was working, doing scouting a full year ago, I watched his tape and I wasn't necessarily blown away. I didn't have him necessarily as a take at the school I was working with prior. And then, I turn on this year's tape and you just see a world of improvement. He's quicker. He knows when to pull the trigger now. He closes out very well, great closing speed, good football instincts. Again, there's technique things that, Coach Henry will have to coach up, but, I think the big thing that Illinois fans could be excited about, he knows how to tackle. He could wrap up. That was a big point of contention at times this year. And he's a guy, you throw him into a secondary room where I think maybe like a Mac Resetich could also play some good free safety reps for this team next year. If you have those two guys in a rotation, they're both upperclassmen. They're both, they've now both experienced the Big Ten growing pains and they played through it. I think that's a secondary room that I feel great about. Now, the point of contention here, defensive line. They've added 3 names right now: Isaiah Thomason from Bowling Green, Carter Janke from Penn, and Carter Sullivan from Washington State. Sullivan also being a Loyola Academy grad, so he's an in-state recruit as well. Kind of a year delay having gone to Wazoo prior. But I think of the 3 of them, Sullivan's probably more of a developmental piece. I think they're going to need Janke and Thomason to play day one next year. Do they start? I'm not sure. I think they're at worst, significant rotational 2-deep guys, but based on the room right now, unless, some of the freshmen that came in this year are ready to play day one, they might have to play. They probably need to add 3 to 4 more defensive linemen in this portal in order to, kind of fill out the room. At this point, the roster is not fully set. They have spots to give. I also think, you could probably add 1 more guy to the secondary room. You probably need 1 or 2 more linebackers. And then you need a backup quarterback to replace, oh my goodness, I'm going to blank on his name. The quarterback. Yeah. The quarterback from NIU who transferred out, they have to replace some backup depth as well. But, so in total, I would say you probably need like 7 or 8 more transfers to fill out the class entirely. But I think you've got the foundation of a fantastic class. And I apologize for the long-winded answer, but I think that, kind of goes, down the entire list.
That's exactly what we want. We want to kind of go through here and talk about each guy, maybe not, super long on each one, but, kind of talk about what expectations are and stuff like that. And, kind of go through the position groups. So no, you hit the nail on the head, man. I do think on the offensive line, I saw some concern from some fans about maybe not enough players through the offensive line were added through the transfer portal, but that is so difficult to do. Number one, you don't always get the best players on the offensive line. Surprised they were able to get Jake Renfro, not necessarily to get him to come to Illinois, but for a guy like him to go into the portal, because I do think that is the type of player, a center who's older, who has, that playing experience and stuff. That's a really good add. But Illinois also went out and went to the JUCO level and added, 1 or 2 offensive linemen as well. Do you think that the JUCO additions on the offensive line could help supplement maybe the lack of offensive linemen added through the portal?
Yeah, absolutely. I think TJ Taylor, he's the offensive tackle from College of the Canyons in Utah. I think he's a guy, he's going to compete day one for starting reps. Does he win, the starting right or left tackle job? I'm not entirely sure. Personally, I loved what I saw from the younger Knapik brother in the bowl game, and I think his older brother is on par with him. So those are two guys that are going to compete for tackle spots next year. Then you bring in, like you said, the JUCOs. TJ Taylor is a guy I'm very high on. Micah Matelau. I apologize if I butchered that last name. I'm still learning how to pronounce them. We'll get the pronunciation guide when we go into next year. But he's an interior guy. I think he shores up one of your starting either right or left guard spots. He's out of Upland Community College of California. He's a guy, he's practicing Mormon. He took a mission trip, skipped a couple years right out of high school. So he was old starting out. He's like a 20-year-old freshman. And then he played as a freshman and sophomore at the community college level and was fantastic. And now he's going to be, a 21, 22-year-old, redshirt sophomore playing Power 4 football. He's, again, if you're going to try to replace an offensive line or a defensive line, it's probably best to get older. And Illinois, quietly has done a very good job of this. Obviously, between the MLB draft pick linebacker and the, 2-year mission trip offensive lineman, it helps. It can be a little bit of a novelty at times to some fans, but it's not. It's really important to get older, and I like what they've done. I like how they've approached that. I'm also, kind of curious. I'm monitoring Micah Smith, Champion Smith, the interior or possibly tackle offensive lineman out of Vero Beach that Illinois signed. He was kind of a big signing day flip, I would say. He decommitted from UCLA, a day or two before officially committing to Illinois. But he was, kind of Illinois' big signing day surprise. That's a kid I don't think Illinois lands if they tell him that he's outside of the 2 deep as a freshman. So, he'll get a chance to compete. Do I think he's your starting left tackle next year as a true freshman, 18 years old? I just said how important it is to get older. I don't know if he starts next year. But he's a guy, he earns maybe that 6th, 7th spot in the offensive line room. He could be a guy that plays rotational reps, especially if he's willing to play some interior starting out day one. Like, he might get some real reps for this team next year.
Well, it's not uncommon to see a freshman come in, get some interior reps, and then eventually kick out to tackle or something like that. I think, if you're a freshman, if anything, you're just happy to get reps to, put some reps on tape and show the coaches and everybody else that, like, hey, I can do this. You can trust me to be out there. So if that does end up happening for Champ Smith, I think that would be a huge win for him. So when you look at the transfer portal rankings here, Illinois 10th in the Big Ten on 3, 15th in the Big Ten on 24/7. Just did an episode with Jeffrey the Greek for Iowa talking about that, and we kind of went a little bit talking about how maybe the rankings don't exactly matter, and this is one of those instances when, and I'm not trying to disparage on 3 or 24/7 either, but this is one of those situations where it is so difficult to try and rank these classes, talk about who has the best players, maybe who lost the best players, who added the best. I mean, it's such a difficult thing to do, and it's one of the reasons why you see like these top 10 classes. Typically, half of these classes do amazing. Miami and Indiana, teams like that, and then the other half of the classes, you're talking about your LSU's and teams like that, they just completely tank because it's so difficult to try and rank these classes with teams bringing in players and losing players and everything else. If you look at the rankings, it does look like a lot of concern for Illinois with the players that they lost. I mean, a lot of the top tier players that Illinois had on 3 were the players they lost. Kurt Neal, Cole Rusk, different guys like that, that went elsewhere. And I think if you are somebody who's doing rankings or something like that, you're like, oh, Illinois might not be too good next year. But I do think we don't need to get into every single story for every guy. But I do think after talking with you, Carson, and doing a little bit more research, not all of these were necessarily the biggest losses in the world. I'm not asking you to cope here and tell us that, no, the losses didn't mean anything. But, just from your perspective, is Illinois losing as much as maybe the transfer portal rankings indicate?
It's a fine line to walk there.
And I'm not asking you to disparage anybody or anything like that, but I guess probably a better question way to ask this question is, do the losses concern you maybe as much as another person who's on the outside looking in and just looks at the star ratings and says, oh my gosh, they lost all the best players on their team? Does it concern you to that level? Or are you kind of look at this and saying, I think Illinois got a plan here. It's not good riddance, but it is trust the team. There's a plan here.
Yeah, I think that's probably more of a fair way to say it. I frankly, I think the team, outside of one or two guys, like David Alano is a guy that they would have absolutely kept if they had the option to. But for most guys on this team, every player has a price that they're willing to take to come back. Some players maybe have other priorities outside of money as well. Certainly, I'm sure money wasn't the factor for every player who entered the portal. But you know, if they wanted to keep a guy bad enough, they probably had the funds around to pay a few of them. Now, they couldn't have paid every single guy the money that they were asking for. That's not reasonable, and it's probably not good GMing. So I'm, as someone who's paid attention to this, it's probably smart that they didn't give the asking price to every single player who had an asking price to come back that left. Now,
and that doesn't mean the player's bad or anything. It just means they evaluated the situation and said, we're going to, go this way instead of this way, right?
Yeah. Kurt Signetti kind of spoke on this, his eval process in the last couple of months is you have to value production. And if a guy is asking for, X amount of money that's up here and their production is just kind of in the middle, you're not going to pay it. Maybe their production is up there next year, but you never know. Some of these guys might transfer and get buried in the 2 or 3 deep at, the school they go to. Coaching matters. The right situation matters. Not every guy's going to make the right decision. Some guys will make the right decision and they'll be awesome. David Olano, I would be shocked if he's not, pushing for All-American status next year. I think he's no doubt one of the best kickers in the nation. So, I think he'll be fine wherever he goes, but not every guy is going to be in that kind of situation. So I think Illinois will be okay here. I think the one point of concern that, we can mention is they probably haven't landed all of their primary options in the portal as far as who they were targeting. I think there's some guys that they maybe thought they'd be competitors for that, got out of the price range pretty quickly, or frankly, just they didn't gain traction with. There are some guys that they do have traction with. Akiana Davis is a guy that, I'm sure Illinois would love to have for visit. He may visit, he may not. I don't know if that's in the works right now, but Miami, Florida State are the two schools I've heard a lot for him, and that's going to be tough to beat. I mean, he visited Miami this week. I know they just lost the national title, but it's still Miami was in the national title this year, and they're not throwing around small money still. So, that's you got to go out and win a bidding war for a guy or two if you want to have that star level player in the defensive line. But I think I trust their scouting process. Coach Jameson is a fantastic developer of defensive linemen. I'm sure they'll be fine, but for like the next week or so, as we kind of sort through whoever is left in the portal, and Illinois fans have to sit patiently until they solidify who's visiting and who we're trending for, it's going to be tough. Joshua Pierce is a guy that I'm still following closely. Defensive lineman out of / edge player out of North Texas. I think Oklahoma State, Cal are in there as well, along with Illinois. I'd say those are the top 3 right now. That's going to be a tough one. I think if Oklahoma State really wants to push to close them, he did play for that coaching staff for the Mean Green last year that are now in Stillwater. So that'll be tough to beat. But Illinois did get the first visit. He had great reviews about it. So, they add him. He's a guy I feel great about in the rotation. North Texas won 12 games this year for a reason. He was a fantastic rotational piece on that team. So they add him. Yeah, I feel good. You still need to add probably 2 or 3 more valuable pieces, but I trust that they'll get it headed in the right direction. It's just right now, like if you were to play the season with what they have, depth is limited. So they do need either some guys who are freshmen this year or incoming freshmen. You probably need 1 or 2 guys to kind of outplay, jump expectations. And that's possible, right? Joe Barnum, Gabe Akis, both of them were guys who popped onto the scene as freshmen that Illinois didn't necessarily expect to make impacts. Akis especially, he was an All-American. I mean, and as a true freshman, he got in, one guy went down, he got in, and he never came off the field after that. So you never know what's going to happen. It's definitely nerve-wracking for fans, but if Illinois didn't like what they had, they probably would be acting with more urgency. That would be my final read on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it speaks to good coaching too. Good eye for talent and everything else. Maybe looking at a guy and just seeing the clay that is there that could be molded into what they want. And us as fans don't always see that, or rankings don't always see that, but the coaches do. And so hopefully Illinois got something like that there. So last player I asked you about, touched on him a little bit earlier, Carson, but Katin Houser coming in. Luke Altmyer, one of the best quarterbacks in Illinois history, with what he was able to accomplish accomplish, his level of play, and everything else. Katin Houser has some big footsteps to fill here with Luke Altmyer, but Houser in itself, been playing since his freshman year. He played at Michigan State there. He's played the past 2 years at East Carolina. I mean, what are your thoughts on Katin Houser and bringing him in? I mean, do you think he will be able to come in and have success, in just this 1 year? He's a senior. He's only going to be there for 1 year. Luke Altmyer was there for multiple years. What are your thoughts about him coming in for just this 1 year and how that'll go?
Yeah, I mean, if we think back to Luke Altmyer 2 seasons ago, so not this season, but 2 seasons ago, the kind of formula, estimated formula for winning going into the year was, throw for 200 yards and some change, limit turnovers. You don't need to be a game changer to win games because of, both the offensive, defensive, and also special teams. Like all 3 phases were reliable. Now, this last year, the defensive phase was a little less reliable. I still think that this team is capable of playing winning football on the defensive end. Again, I love the additions in the secondary. I think the secondary will be better next year. You have to bank on the defensive line also showing up there. But, they won 10 games when the expectation going into the year was throw for 200 yards and limit turnovers for Luke Altmyer, coming off of his freshman year where he was, turnovers were a little bit of an issue. So, looking at Katin Houser, he's not a guy who's particularly turnover prone. Yeah, he's thrown a few picks in his life, but outside of his freshman year at Michigan State, where he was thrust into a terrible situation, I think he threw as many picks over the last 2 years as he did as a redshirt freshman at Michigan State. So he's a guy who doesn't turn the ball over a ton. He is capable of being a game changer. He has a great arm. He threw for, 200 and some change every game this year at Eastern Carolina. I think it probably high, like 270 average, something in that range. I know he threw for just under 3,000 yards in the regular season. So, math off the top of my head, I think that's around 275 a game. But, he's a guy, I think he could certainly throw for 250 a game. And if you get a dude who's passing for 250 a game, you have 3 running backs coming back that you feel, to varying degrees of good to awesome about. If Khalil Valentine could take a step forward next year, be a 1,000-yard rusher for this team, I think offensively you have the formula to play winning football. And I don't think Katin Houser is going to hold the team back from that.
I don't think so either. So it's so interesting thinking of a Bret Bielema team and being led by the offense and everything else. But hey, that's what you got when you got Barry Lunny Jr. He's a really good offensive coordinator. I thought that Illinois might lose him this offseason. I was thinking maybe a larger team might come in and try to poach him, but looks like he's sticking around, and that's great for Illinois to have that. So Carson, man, good talking to you on this. A lot of good production coming in for Illinois here. We'll keep eyes on Illinois and see if they can keep adding some guys here, especially on the defensive line. Is there any final thoughts on or anything on this class you want to get to before we get out of here?
Yeah, I just, for the Illinois fans that are worried about it, somebody is going to surprise you. It might be good, could be bad, but there's always a surprise every year. Sometimes there's multiple. We'll see what happens. That we will. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the Big Ten Huddle with this Illinois transfer portal discussion, recap, whatever you want to call it. We're going to be recapping, talking through every single transfer portal team out there, Big Ten team out there with their transfer portal, because honestly, you can't look at the rankings and get the full story of these things. And so that's why we bring in guys like Carson, Jeffrey the Greek from Iowa, which that one's already out. And we got some other really good guests that are going to talk about it, the transfer portal classes with us as well. So stay tuned here on the Big Ten Huddle. I'll add this video, the Iowa video, and all the other ones to a playlist here on YouTube, and that way you can just go through and see them all there and get yourself up to date on all the Big Ten teams. So we appreciate it, everybody. Have a good one. See you next time.